There is a version of you that already has the money. He already exists, right now fully formed, standing just on the other side of a line you have been afraid to cross. He does not worry about bills. He does not check the balance with that tightness in his chest. He moves through the world with the quiet certainty of a man for whom money was settled a long time ago. He is not a fantasy, and he is not the future. He is you, the money self, waiting to take over, and the only reason he has not taken over yet is that you keep looking back. You keep turning around to look at the old broke self, to check on him, to make sure he is still there, to ask him whether this is really going to work. And every time you look back, you step out of the new self and back into the old one. So before you cross, before you let the money self finally take the wheel, there is one last thing you have to do, and it is the hardest thing in this entire teaching, because everything in you will resist it. You have to stop looking back. You have to leave him there. Do not look back. Let me tell you what looking back actually is, because you are doing it constantly, and you do not even know it. Looking back is checking the bank balance to see if the assumption worked yet. Looking back is replaying the memory of the time you were humiliated by money. Looking back is telling the story of how hard it has been, how long you have struggled, how many times it did not work. Looking back is scanning your current life for proof before you will allow yourself to believe. Every one of those is a turn of the head toward the man you are trying to leave. And here is the cruelty of it. You cannot cross into the new life while your face is pointed at the old one. You cannot walk forward while staring backward. The money self cannot take over a body whose eyes are fixed on the broke past. So the whole work right now is to turn your face forward and keep it there no matter how loudly the old life calls your name. Neville loved an old story about this, and it is worth hearing even if you have heard it before, because it is not really about the people in it. A city was being destroyed, and a family was told to leave, to walk out and not look back. And one of them, almost out, almost free, could not resist one last glance at the life she was leaving. And the moment she looked back, she turned into a pillar of salt, frozen, fixed in place forever, at the exact spot where she chose the past over the future. That is not a fairy tale about geography. That is a precise description of what happens in your mind. The instant you turn to look longingly or fearfully at the old broke life, you freeze. You become a pillar of salt, stuck at the boundary, unable to move into the new state because you gave your attention back to the thing you were supposed to leave. The people who never make it into the rich life are not the ones who lacked the desire. They are the ones who could not stop looking back, who froze at the threshold with their eyes on what they were leaving instead of on where they were going. So why is it so hard to stop? Why does the old self pull at you with such force right at the moment you are about to be free? Because the old self is fighting for its life. It has run your world for years, maybe for your entire life, and it does not want to die. And make no mistake, that is what crossing into the money self requires. The old broke self has to die. Not your body, not your memories, but that identity, that sense of being the one who lacks, the one who struggles, the one who has to be careful, the one for whom money is always a problem. That self has to be left at the threshold, and it knows it, and so it makes the most noise exactly when you are closest to crossing. It whispers, "But what about reality?" It whispers, "Remember last time." It whispers, "Do not get your hopes up." Every one of those whispers is a hand on your shoulder trying to turn you around. And your only job, the last thing to do, is to keep walking and refuse to turn your head. Now I want to show you what taking over actually means, because the phrase "the money self takes over" is not poetry. It is a precise instruction. Right now you are managing your money mindset. You are working at it. You are trying to feel wealthy, trying to assume, trying to hold the state, white-knuckled, exhausting yourself. That trying is itself the old self, because the new self does not try to feel wealthy, any more than you try to feel like yourself when you wake up in the morning. Taking over means you stop managing the assumption and let it run on its own. You hand the controls to the version of you who already has it, and you let him drive. He does not need to be reminded to feel rich. He does not need affirmations. He does not need to convince himself. He simply is. And from that being, the right thoughts and the right calm and the right actions flow without strain. The last thing to do before he takes over is to get out of the driver's seat, to stop steering with the anxious hands of the broke self, and to let the one who knows take the wheel. And you cannot do that while you keep looking in the rearview mirror at who you used to be. Let me make this practical. because a threshold you do not actually cross is just a nice idea you visited. The crossing happens in a specific place, and that place is the doorway of sleep. Every night you walk through a threshold whether you know it or not, from waking into sleep, and in that drowsy in-between place, the old guard of your critical mind falls asleep at his post. That is the moment to cross, not by trying, by assuming. You lie down and you do not review the day, and you do not check the balance one last time in your mind, and you do not rehearse the worry. You construct one short scene that would only be real if you had already crossed, if the money self had already taken over. A scene of ease, of being congratulated, of paying without flinching, of holding the phone and feeling nothing but calm because of course it is handled, and you let yourself fall asleep inside that scene as that self. You walk through the doorway facing forward, and you do not look back at the broke man you left in the waking world. Do that night after night, and the money self stops being a visitor and becomes the resident, because you keep falling asleep as him until your subconscious can no longer tell the difference between the rehearsal and the truth. I want to stop here for a moment and ask something of you, because this next part is where the crossing either holds or fails, and I do not want you to drift past it. If you can feel that threshold, if some part of you knows exactly which old self you have been looking back at, go to the pinned comment and write the words "I am crossing." Just that. I am crossing. It is a small act, but it is you facing forward on purpose, planting a flag in the new ground instead of the old. And it tells me to keep handing you the rest of this, because the rest is about what happens after you cross, when the old life sends its messengers to call you back. So write it "I'm crossing" and then stay with me, because the threshold is not the end of the test, it is the beginning of it. Here is what nobody warns you about. The moment you cross, the old life does not just let you go. It sends its evidence after you like messengers running down the road, calling your name, waving the old story in your face. You assume the new self before sleep. You wake up having crossed, and within an hour the 3D arrives with a bill, a number, a comment, a reminder of exactly who you used to be. And it is asking you one question. Will you turn around? Will you look back now that the proof has not changed, now that the bank still says what it said? This is the pillar of salt moment, replayed every single day until the crossing is complete, and the old self is screaming, "See, you did not really cross? Nothing changed, come back to me where it is safe." And in that moment you do the last thing again. You do not look back. You feel the bill, you handle the bill, and you keep your face forward because you know the bill is a messenger from a life you already left, and you do not take orders from a place you no longer live. The crossing is not a single dramatic step. It is the daily refusal to turn around when the old life calls. Let me be very clear about the difference between leaving the old self and pretending he never existed, because people get this wrong, and it trips them. You are not in denial. You are not pretending you have money you do not yet have in your hands. You see the balance clearly. You acknowledge the present condition. The difference is that you no longer let it turn your head. The woman in the story was not destroyed for knowing the city was behind her. She was destroyed for turning to gaze at it with longing, for giving it her attention and her heart one more time. You can know the old life is behind you without staring at it. You can see the low number without worshipping it. Leaving the old self is not closing your eyes to reality. It is keeping your face pointed at the reality you are moving into, while the old one fades behind you, no longer fed by your gaze. What you do not look at with feeling, you do not feed. What you do not feed dies. The old broke self starves the moment you stop turning around to keep him company. I want to talk about grief because there is grief in this, and if you do not understand it, you will mistake it for failure. When you leave the old self behind, a part of you mourns him. He kept you safe in his way. His low expectations protected you from disappointment. His caution felt like wisdom. His struggle was familiar, and the familiar feels like home even when it is a prison. So as you cross, you may feel a strange sadness, an urge to go back, not because the new life is wrong, but because the old one is known. That is the pull of the pillar of salt. That is the moment the woman turned. Recognize the grief for what it is. It is not a sign that you should return. It is the natural ache of leaving a self you wore for a long time. Let it ache and keep walking. You do not have to hate the old broke self to leave him. You can thank him for getting you this far and still refuse to take him across because he cannot live where you are going. The rich life has no room for the identity that was built entirely around not having. Now here is the deepest thing I can give you about the money self, and I want you to sit with it. He is not someone you become through years of effort. He is someone you assume in an instant and then remain faithful to. The crossing is immediate. The moment you assume the new self fully, you have crossed. What takes time is not the crossing. What takes time is the not looking back. Anyone can assume the wealthy self for a moment. The whole game is whether you can keep facing forward in the hours and days after, when the old life is screaming and the evidence has not caught up. The money self takes over, not when you try hard enough, but when you stop returning to the broke self to check on him. Every time you go back to look, you reset the clock. Every time you stay forward, the new self sinks deeper into your bones, until one day you realize you have not thought about the old broke man in weeks, and that is the day he is truly dead, and the day the money self is truly you, and usually that is right around the time the outer world finally delivers the proof you stopped needing. Let me give you a way to know you are actually crossing and not just thinking about crossing, because the mind loves to confuse contemplation with movement. You are crossing when your reactions change. The old self reacts to a low balance with a drop in the stomach, a spike of fear, a spiral of worry. As the money self takes over, the same low balance arrives and you notice something strange. It does not move you the way it used to. You feel the pull, but you do not turn around. Later, it does not even register, because it no longer matches the man you have become, and your mind discards it as noise from a life you left. That growing steadiness is the proof of crossing, long before the bank account shows anything. Stop measuring your progress by the money. Measure it by how little the old life can still turn your head. The day the broke evidence can no longer make you look back is the day you have crossed for good, and the money is simply a matter of time after that, because the world always, eventually, rearranges itself to match the self you refuse to abandon. So let me draw the whole thing into one image you can carry. You are standing at a threshold. Behind you is the broke self, the struggle, the careful man, the long story of not enough, and the entire 3D that proves it. Ahead of you is the money self, already formed, already calm, already living in the rich life as a settled fact. The last thing to do before he takes over is to turn your face forward and walk, and to keep walking when the old life calls your name, and to refuse every single day to turn around and look back. You cross in the doorway of sleep, assuming the new self until your subconscious cannot tell rehearsal from memory. You stay crossed by handling the messengers of the old life without giving them your gaze. You let the grief ache without obeying it, and you measure your progress not by your balance but by how little the past can still move you. Do not look back. The man you were cannot come with you, and the man you are becoming is already on the other side, waiting for you to stop checking on the one you left behind. I want to take you deeper into the mechanics of looking back, because it is subtler than you think, and it hides inside things that feel responsible and even spiritual. You think you are crossing, and then you catch yourself telling someone the story of how hard your money struggle has been, and in the telling you have turned all the way around and walked back into the old self, because to tell that story with feeling, you have to become the man it happened to. You think you are crossing, and then you sit down to plan, and the planning is soaked in the assumption of lack, every number calculated from fear, and you have looked back without moving your eyes. You think you are crossing, and then you pray or you affirm or you visualize from a place of wanting, of please let this come, and the wanting itself is a backward glance at the self who does not have it. Looking back is not always dramatic. Most of the time it is quiet, disguised, woven into ordinary thoughts. So the discipline is to watch for the feeling of lack in anything you do, because wherever that feeling is, your face has turned around, and the moment you notice it, you turn forward again gently without scolding yourself, and you return to the calm certainty of the self who has already crossed. There is a question underneath all of this that I have to answer, because it is the thing that keeps people frozen at the threshold for years. The question is, what if I cross and the money does not come? What if I leave the old self, I face forward, I refuse to look back, and the rich life still does not arrive? And here is the answer, and it is the answer that sets you free. That fear is itself a backward glance. It is the old self, reaching forward to grab you, using the future as a disguise. A man who has truly crossed does not ask what if it does not come, because for him it is already done, and you do not ask whether something will arrive that you already possess. The very presence of that question is the proof that you are still standing with one foot in the old self, still hedging, still keeping the broke man close in case you need him. The crossing requires you to burn that bridge, to assume the rich life so completely that the question of whether it will come no longer makes sense, because you are no longer waiting for it, you are living from it. You do not cross a little. You do not leave the old self halfway. You either turn your face forward and commit, or you stand frozen at the line forever, looking back, slowly turning to salt. The boldness is the whole thing. The ones who cross are the ones who dared to leave the old self with no guarantee, on nothing but the certainty of their own assumption. Let me speak to the part of you that is afraid this is irresponsible, because that fear is the loudest voice keeping you at the threshold. You think that to leave the broke self is to abandon caution, to stop being sensible, to walk blindly into ruin. But look closely at what the broke self has actually produced. All his caution, all his careful worry, all his realistic low expectations. And where has it gotten you? The broke self is not protecting you. He is producing your lack, faithfully, day after day, by assuming it and broadcasting it and proving it. Leaving him is not the reckless choice. Staying with him is the reckless choice, because staying guarantees the continuation of everything you are trying to escape. The money self is not careless. He simply does not organize his life around fear. He handles what needs handling with a calm that the broke self could never manage because his hands are not shaking. So when the fear says it is irresponsible to cross, recognize that the fear is the voice of the very self whose results you are trying to leave behind, and ask yourself why you would take financial advice from the part of you that has only ever produced lack. And here is one final thing about the money self that changes how seriously you take this whole crossing. He is not a stranger you are inventing. He is who you would have always been if no one had ever taught you to be afraid of money, if no one had ever spoken lack into you, if you had grown up hearing wealth as your native language. The crossing is not into a fake persona. It is a return to the self underneath all the conditioning, the one who was never afraid, the one for whom having was natural before the world taught you that struggle was noble, and wanting was greedy, and caution was wisdom. When you cross into the money self, you are not becoming someone you are not. You are shedding everything you were told to be and returning to the one you actually are underneath it. That is why it feels both terrifying and strangely like coming home. The old broke self is the costume. The money self is the skin. And the last thing to do before you wear your own skin again is to take the costume off and leave it at the threshold and walk forward into the life that was always meant to be yours, and do not, for any reason, look back to pick the costume up again. I want to walk you through the actual moment of crossing, slowed down, so you know exactly what it feels like and do not mistake it for something else. You lie down tonight. The day is behind you, and the broke self is loud, because he always gets loud at the threshold. He wants to review the numbers one more time. He wants to worry about tomorrow. He wants to tell you the story of how it has always been hard. That noise is not a sign that you cannot cross. That noise is the sound of the old self realizing you are about to leave. So you let him talk, and you do not argue, and you do not fight, because fighting him is just another way of facing him, another backward glance. Instead, you turn your attention gently to the scene, the small scene of the life already handled, and you step into it, not as someone hoping to get there, but as someone who is already there, looking out through the eyes of the money self. And the strangest thing happens. As you give your attention to the new self, the old self gets quieter, not because you silenced him, but because you stopped feeding him with your gaze. You fall asleep facing forward. That is the crossing. It is not dramatic. There is no thunder. There is just a quiet turning of attention from the man you were to the man you are, repeated until the turning becomes permanent. Let me tell you what the morning after the first real crossing feels like, because it will confuse you if you are not ready for it. You wake up and nothing has changed. The room is the same, the balance is the same, and the broke self is right there, waiting, ready to say, "See, it did not work. You are still me." This is the most important moment of the entire process, more important than the crossing itself, because the crossing is easy, and the staying crossed is everything. In that first waking moment, you have a choice that you will face every morning for a while. You can agree with the broke self, look at the unchanged room, feel the old drop in your stomach, and climb right back into him, undoing the night's crossing in a single sigh. Or you can do the last thing, the only thing, and refuse to look back. You can wake as the money self, even though the room has not caught up, even though there is no proof, even though everything visible argues against you. The proof is not supposed to be there yet. The room is the last thing to change, not the first. The first thing to change is you, and you have already changed. If you simply refuse to unchange the moment your eyes open and see the old evidence still standing there. There is a kind of courage in this that no one talks about, because we usually think of courage as facing something frightening. This is the opposite. This is the courage to turn your back on something frightening and walk away without checking whether it is following you. The broke life is frightening. The bills are frightening. The numbers are frightening. And every instinct you have says to keep your eyes on the threat, to watch it, to monitor it, the way you would watch a dangerous animal. But here, that instinct is precisely what freezes you. To cross, you have to do the thing that feels insane to the frightened mind. You have to turn your back on the threat and trust that by refusing to feed it with your attention, it loses its power over you. This is why so few people cross. Not because the crossing is hard in itself, but because it requires you to stop staring at the very thing your survival instinct screams at you to watch. The money self has learned what the broke self never could. That what you stare at with fear you keep alive, and what you turn away from with calm you starve. I want to address the people who have crossed before and slid back, because some of you have done this. You assumed the new self, you felt it, you crossed, and then weeks later you found yourself right back in the old broke identity, wondering what happened. Here is what happened. You looked back one too many times, not in a single dramatic moment, but in a slow accumulation of small backward glances, a worried calculation here, a retelling of the old story there, a check of the balance with that familiar tightness, a conversation where you slipped into being the struggling one because it was easier than holding the new self. Each one was small, each one felt harmless, but together they turned your face all the way around, and one morning you woke up and the broke self was driving again, and you did not even remember handing him the wheel. This is not failure. This is information. It tells you that the crossing is not a one-time event, but a direction you have to keep choosing, a face you have to keep pointed forward, until forward becomes your natural orientation, and looking back becomes the thing that feels strange. If you slid back, you simply cross again, and this time you guard the small glances, because you have learned that the old self does not reclaim you all at once. He reclaims you one backward look at a time. Let me give you something to hold on to in the hardest stretch, the stretch between crossing and proof, when the old life is loud and the new life is silent. In that stretch, you are going to feel like a fool. You are going to feel like you are pretending, like you are lying to yourself, like the whole thing is a delusion you are propping up against a wall of contradicting facts. I want you to know that this feeling is not a sign that you are wrong. It is a sign that you are exactly where the crossing happens. Every person who has ever moved from one life to another has stood in this exact stretch, where the old reality is still fully present, and the new one has not yet shown its face and has had to choose, on nothing but faith, to remain the new self anyway. This is the narrow place. This is where almost everyone turns to salt, and the only thing that carries you through it is the refusal to look back, held not for a triumphant moment, but through long, unglamorous, unconfirmed days. The reward is not immediate. The reward comes to the one who stayed forward long after it stopped feeling exciting, when staying forward had become a quiet, stubborn act of will. That stubbornness is the whole thing. The money self is not the one who feels it most. He is the one who refused to turn around the longest and understand what you are really leaving behind, because it is more than a feeling about money. You are leaving an entire way of seeing the world. The broke self does not just lack money. He sees scarcity everywhere. He sees a world of not enough, of competition, of doors closing, of other people getting what he cannot. He reads every event through the lens of lack. The money self sees a different world, not because he is naive, but because his assumption colors everything he perceives. He sees a world where things work out, where doors open, where what he needs finds its way to him, where there is enough. These are not two descriptions of the same world. In a real sense, they are two different worlds, because each self lives inside the world his assumption creates and perceives. When you cross, you are not just changing your bank account. You are moving from a world of scarcity into a world of sufficiency, and you will start to notice things you never noticed before, opportunities that were always there but invisible to the broke self because his eyes were trained to see only lack. Do not look back. Because looking back is not just returning to a feeling, it is returning to an entire world. The small grey world of not enough, and you have a larger one waiting on the other side of the line. So when you feel the pull to turn around, and you will feel it, I want you to remember what is actually behind you. It is not safety, it is not wisdom, it is not the responsible choice. Behind you is a small grey world where money is always a problem, where every want is shadowed by the fear of not having, where you spend your one life carefully managing a scarcity you yourself keep creating by staring at it. That is what calls your name when the old life sends its messengers. It dresses itself up as realism, as caution, as the sensible thing, but it is just the small grey world trying to keep one of its own. And ahead of you is a life where money is settled, where the question that has haunted you is simply answered, where you move with the ease of a man who stopped fighting a war that was never real. When you remember what is actually behind you, the pull to look back loses its grip, because no one in their right mind turns around to gaze longingly at a prison. You only look back when you have forgotten that the old life was a cell. So do not forget. Keep your face forward, and remember that the thing calling you back is the very thing you are escaping. One more thing before the instruction, because it will save you from the single most common mistake. Do not announce your crossing to the people still living in the old world. The broke selves around you, the friends and family who are fluent in lack, will hear you declare your new life, and they will, without meaning harm, try to pull you back, because your crossing threatens the world they have agreed to live in. They will call it realism. They will remind you of the numbers. They will ask, gently or not, who do you think you are? And every one of those is a hand reaching out to turn your head. So you do not need their agreement, and you do not need to convince them. You cross in silence. You let the money self take over quietly, privately, without a single witness, until the proof arrives and speaks for itself. The crossing is between you and the self you are becoming. No one at the threshold gets a vote, least of all the ones who never intend to cross it themselves. Keep it quiet, keep it sacred, and keep your face forward. So here is what I'm asking you to do starting tonight, and it is simple to say, and it will take everything you have to do. Tonight, at the doorway of sleep, cross. Assume the money self. Build the small scene of the life already handled, and fall asleep inside it, facing forward. And tomorrow, when the old life sends its messengers, when the bill comes and the number stares, and the old story calls your name, do not look back. Handle what is in front of you with the calm hands of the self who has already crossed, and keep your face pointed at the life you are moving into. Do this not for a dramatic week, but until the old broke self is a stranger you barely remember. The crossing is yours to make. The money self is already there, already calm, already waiting. The only thing standing between you and him is the habit of turning around. So turn forward and walk, and whatever you do, do not look back. Before you go, do one thing for me, because it will help lock this in. In the comments, tell me what you are leaving behind at the threshold, written as if you have already crossed. Not, I am trying to leave the broke me, but I have left him, I am not looking back. Name the old self you are walking away from, and declare that you have crossed, because the moment you say it that way, you make it real, and you make it harder to turn around. And stay close to this channel, because I am going to keep walking with you through the life on the other side of that line, step by step, until the money self is not someone you cross into, but simply who you are. The old you cannot come with you. The new you is already there. Don't look back.